So, first and foremost, where do you get acapellas? Well, other than vinyl records, you can get them at acapellasforyou.uk, which is a really cool site. I'll link that in the description. I honestly get a lot of them off of YouTube. After all of the Guitar Hero and Rock Band video games came out, if you go to YouTube and just type in Led Zeppelin and then isolated vocals, you can find a ton of stuff nowadays with that. So they're all over the internet. There's also the factor of studio acapellas versus what they call do-it-yourself acapellas, the DIYs. Studio acapellas means that somebody went into the project file, whether it was on a computer, whether it was on a big mixing board, and they actually rendered out only the vocals. So one thing you got to know is there isn't an acapella, or there's not a studio acapella for just any song. They either exist or they don't. Now, a DIY acapella is when people try to take regular versions of songs and use plugins or software or some kind of EQ to extract the vocals from the song. That rarely sounds good. I would say about like 3% of all DIY acapellas are even usable. There's also a technique where you can like put an instrumental version of a song and line it up with the regular version of the song and then reverse the instrumental and phase out the vocals. That's a weird technique. You can look that up too. It also only works 30% of the time. I usually only mess with studio acapellas because other than that, it's usually just a hassle and you're usually trying to like save something or perform miracles or something. And I'd always rather just start with something that sounds good in the first place. The next thing I want to mention is if you are going to do a remix or a mashup and use an acapella, get familiar with the original version of the song. Make sure you know that like the back of your hand, because that's going to help you, first of all, just make a better remix. But secondly, there's some curveballs out there. Some songs like Kendrick Lamar literally change tempos and completely change beats in the middle of the song. If you're not familiar with the original version of the song you have an acapella of, there's a good chance that something's going to be really confusing and, throw you off and screw everything up. A lot of times there's something in the original that might be really useful in a remix or mashup too. Maybe even a skit at the beginning or end, or just some little thing that you wouldn't want to miss if you were trying to make a really cool remix or blend. Third most, is the acapella recorded on the grid or off the grid? Sequence music is usually quantized. And so a lot of like rap, hip hop, electronic is usually quantized. And live bands a lot of times are not quantized. It's what you would call off the grid, meaning it's all just kind of liquid and fluid. However, that can get tricky too, because just because it's a rapper on the acapella, that doesn't mean that it's a sequence quantized song. For instance, I have the Rage Against the Machine Bomb Track acapella, Zach De La Rocha, and it's not quantized. So when I made a DJ edit for it so I could blend it over this little TI beat or whatever I was doing, I had to really manually cut it up because it was off the grid. And sometimes live bands will record to a click or record to some kind of scrap loop. So sometimes bands are on the grid. So you really never know, which is another reason to really go and listen to the original song and make sure you understand your source material. Because if it's completely sequencing on the grid, then once you have it synced, it'll be synced for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or whatever. But if it's not, you'll have to kind of babysit it and cut it up a little bit. Next, let's talk about finding the tempo. There's a lot of softwares that will tell you the tempo and the key of your MP3s. I use Serato DJ. There's all kinds, and they're all a little different. You can't totally depend on these softwares. It's a good starting point. If Serato DJ tells me a beat is 92 beats per minute, it's either exactly that or it's really close, because a lot of these softwares and algorithms, they round up a little bit For instance, if I went into Ableton and set my DAW to 93.4 beats per minute and then rendered out a song, a lot of softwares will say that's 93 beats per minute. So you might get one that's off a decimal point and then another one that's off another decimal point. And when they're that close, they'll line up for maybe 30 seconds for a while before it'll start to slowly drift away. It's not as simple as, oh, this software tells me what BPM they are. It's easy peasy. There's always weird variables and frame rates and sample rates and all kinds of weird crap happening that make it really important to keep an eye on. When it comes to key, that gets weird with Serato DJ and those softwares too, because there's relative minors and majors. For instance, like A minor and C major are sort of in a way the same thing. A software might read a song and tell you that it's A minor, but the song really might be in C major. So you can't really trust these programs, but you can let them get you to almost the right answer. All right, back to Mr. Busta Rhymes here.
When I step up in the place, say yo, I step correct.
The first thing I want to do is figure out the tempo, which, like I was saying, Serato told me that it was 93 beats per minute. I, once upon a time, labeled it as 92, so it's going to be somewhere around there. I brought up this Redman instrumental that sounds like this. It's also labeled 92, which I've had a lot of these for years, so I don't know if I just manually enter that number, but it doesn't matter. I have two things that are supposed to be 92, 93. The first thing I want to do on this acapella is find my downbeat. Let's listen to the very beginning of this.
When I step up in the place, say yo, I step correct.
I need to figure out which one of these words is landing on the downbeat. So I'm going to come to the original version of the song, which I got up here. And let's find where that verse starts. He yah-yahs for a little while. Okay, here's where he starts.
When I step up in the place, say yo, I step correct.
So if you listen, let me back it up a little further.
When I step up in the place, say yo, I step correct.
He's saying, and when I step up in the place, and that step is the downbeat.
When I step up in the place.
So that's what you need to line up, is this word step right on the downbeat of this Redman instrumental I have pulled out right here. So let's listen to this. This is the downbeat right there. Bum, bum, bum. Back it up one more time. I want to put the word step right where that downbeat is. Right there. Let's listen to this for just a second. I don't have anything warped or pitched or stretched. Everything is completely at zero. Let's see how that lines up.
When I step up in the place, say yo, I step correct.
Good so far. He's starting to get ahead of the beat. Okay, so he's slowly getting faster than the beat, or the acapella file is slowly getting faster than the beat, not our good friend Busta Rhymes. He's doing great. So I'm going to come into here to the acapella file. There's basically three ways to change the pitch. There's the transpose knob right here, which that's going to actually change it in chromatic steps like notes on a piano keyboard. I can also turn warp on, and we all know that with warp you can come in here and add points and stretch things around like a rubber band a little bit. I try to avoid warp when I can because it does introduce artifacts and really starts to degrade the audio after a while. The third way I could adjust this is with this D-tune right here. And this is just a real fine tuner. I'm going to barely change the pitch, just microscopically, to fit the beat. And the listener isn't going to be able to tell that there's a microscopic change in the pitch, and we'll even A-B it. But it's better than warping it, in my opinion, because it's going to preserve all of the sound quality that we're starting with. Let's hit play, and I'm going to bring this D-tune down just a little bit and try to get this on beat.
When I step up in the place, say yo, I step correct. Got you all in check. I got that head shit that make you
Let's see how that rides.
got you all in check. And you know we come through to wreck the discotheque. I got you all in check. Throw your hands up in the air, don't ever disrespect. I got you all in check. Bust the rhymes up in the blaze up, true indeed. Yes, I got records, that's word on my feet.
That sounds nice. So I do have the pitch turned down just a tiny little bit. Here's what it sounds like.
When I step up in the place, say yo, I step correct.
Here's what it sounds like at 0 again.
When I step up in the place, say yo, I step correct.
And then back at -8.
When I step up in the place, say yo, I step correct.
I can't really tell a difference, but let me show you what it sounds like when you warp it even just a little bit. I'm going to put this back at 0. Let's pull this up.
Step up in the place.
And I'm going to make another point like right here.
When I step up in the place, say yo, I step.
So even if I were to just like barely slow this down a little bit using warp,
When I step up in the place.
you can already start to hear it.
When I step up in the. When I step.
And then not warped
When I step. When I step.
and warped.
When I step. When I step.
It sounds kind of like metallic-y. I try to work around the warp mode when I can. And I think this D-tune at -8 sounds really good, preserves all the quality, and I don't really think you can hear the difference in that slight of a pitch change. All right, so let's say you're a little unsure of whether or not you have it on beat. A good way to check is the snare trick. You'll listen to the original version of the song and make a mental note of exactly what words are landing on the snares. And then you compare yours with the original. So let's listen to a little bit of this original Busta Rhymes song and listen for what words are landing on the snare drums.
When I step up in the place.
Right there, place.
When I step up in the place, say yo, I step correct.
And then the rect of correct. So when I step up in the place, you know I come correct. Place and rect are your first two snares.
When I step up in the place, say yo, I step correct.
And then got you is the third snare. If you come down here and listen to where I've blended it with this Redman beat,
When I step up in the place, say yo, I step correct. Got you all in check.
you'll hear all those words lining up the same with those snares.
When I step up in the place, say yo, I step correct. Got you all in.
And that's the ultimate test right there. I do this all the time. Just make sure the right words are hitting the right snares and you're good to go. So here's another twist. There is singing and then there is rapping. And singing is obviously melodic, and rapping can either be melodic, it can also be atonal, it can also be some region in between those two things. This is another thing that's kind of vague, and you just have to take it on a case-by-case basis. But a common mistake I hear DJs and producers doing is they will have an acapella to a rap song where the verse is someone rapping, and then the chorus is another person singing. And they'll have the rap part lined up on the beat, and it'll sound really good. But then when the chorus kicks, it's all out of key, and it's clashing, and it sounds really bad. Here's an example. I have the acapella If I Ruled the World by Nas and Lauryn Hill, and I have it mixed over this Snoop Dogg and Cypress Hill beat. I'm just going to play you a snippet of the beat with Nas rapping over it, and that part of the blend sounds good.
That's the limit. I push the Q45 infinite. It wouldn't be no such thing as jealousies or beef felony. Strictly living longevity to the destiny.
That sounds tight, but watch what happens when the chorus comes around.
Before your time's out, what the fuck?
If I rule the world,
Imagine that.
Ugh.
I free all
Yeah, so that sounds terrible, and it's very disrespectful to Lauryn Hill. So this is where you got to be aware of what key the song is in. Some rapping is sort of singing when you get into like auto-tune styles and stuff like that. And some of it's atonal. That's something you'll just kind of learn as you go. Sometimes rappers won't exactly be singing, but they might be landing on the root note a lot, like ba-bam, 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 kind of monotone, but still in key with the original version of the song. So it's good to try to figure out the key that the song is in too, and that way you won't have these nasty little key clashes on the chorus. And finally, I want to talk about the possibility of being on beat but still being wrong. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but you can have an acapella properly lined up with an instrumental, and you can have it off like by a half a bar or something like that. For instance, listen to this Jay-Z acapella mixed with this Roscoe beat.
My name is Ho, H to the O-V. I used to move snowflakes by the Owsley. I guess even back then you can call me CEO or the ROC. Ho, fresh out the frying pan into the fire.
Okay, so like it doesn't sound like a crazy horrible train wreck, but as we talked about earlier, it's landing on the wrong part of the downbeat. The word hove is supposed to be on the downbeat. So listen to this.
My name is Hove.
He says, my name is Hove. That is supposed to be on the downbeat. But what's happening is the beat is starting and then it's coming in like a count late, like this.
My name is Hove. My name is Hove.
So let's scoot this over and let's hear that.
My name is Hove. H to the O-V.
There it is.
I used to move snowflakes by the OZ.
That's something to watch out for too, and that's a mistake I've even made. I've even released a remix where it was on beat but still wrong, and I'm not going to tell you which one it was, but it was definitely throw some D's. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment right down there. Y'all have a very good day, and peace.
Niggas want a jet, sit tight, no stick, just bought a Cadillac.